Hi guys, my name is Miranda Hunley, and if you like true crime, I think you are in the right place because that's what we talk about here. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So the video I'm doing today is an add-on to the video I did before and the part 1 of 2, and I'm going to be uploading another video. This video is just on the murder of Arthur Smith. So who is Arthur Smith to the time his death becomes a cold case? And then the next video is going to be who they blame it on and, you know, further on from there. So if you didn't watch my first video, feel free, go watch it before you watch this one. If not, you're still gonna know what's going on, so that's cool. Also, something else new about this video is I have Arthur Smith's daughter. I went to her house and I am so grateful for her. She sat down and talked to me and told me a lot about her father and his murder and her point of view of it. So I appreciate her so much, and I'm just going to be adding random clips of her talking in it. She didn't want to be on camera, so I'm probably gonna have some goofy face like while she's talking, so you guys can hear from the horse's mouth about her father's murder. So I'm gonna start off by talking about Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith was a very successful man, and he was a worker horse. He had great ambition. He had a wife and 2 children, one named Sheila, the one who is on this video, and a son named Michael. He went to Africa in World War II. He was on the railroad. He managed multiple shops. He enjoyed managing shops, especially Rinks department store. Unfortunately, his first marriage did not work out, and he didn't really want to get divorced, but things like this happen. So he gets divorced, and shortly after, he meets somebody by the name of Mary Ann. Mary Ann was closer in age with his kids than him, but she kept baking him pies and stuff like that, trying to weasel in, probably because he had the money. But eventually he marries her, and they have a son by the name of Billy. Billy was actually an uncle before he was born, which those type of cases always blow my mind. But my niece, who is 15, 16, has 2 uncles actually that are 10 months older than her. So I know it happens, but I'm just happy it's my family's not the only one. So in 1971, Arthur gets sent to a store in Marion, Ohio to manage and fix up because he was very by the book. He knew what he was doing. If a Rinks department store was kind of going downhill, they always sent Arthur to bring it back up. So that's probably where his bad luck started. I'm kidding. I love Marion, so. But after 9 months, the store in Bellefontaine was having a lot of issues. But once Arthur went to Rinks, things started to get a little weird. So I am going to let Sheila kind of explain what was going on at Rinks. So
there was a lawyer's son at the time was a drug addict or taking drugs heavy, and they suspected him of theft of drugs in the store some way or through someone else. Rinks had a drug department called Gray Drugs, but they weren't part of Rinks itself. They were separate companies. And they had turned the books over to my dad to look at them and see if he could figure out why the books weren't jiving, maybe money shortages. And he kept a black book. We testified in a trial, a little black book with this stuff in it. That book was never found. This lawyer's son, they were trying to talk Dad out of prosecuting him. I'm trying to think of his dad's, Gosley was his dad's name. Gosley, the lawyer, was in Dad's office upstairs at Rinks sometime that week, maybe middle of the week. The prosecutor, Douglas McGilvery, was in there. One of the police detectives, and they were all pressuring Dad and arguing with him not put charges against him. Dad told him no. He sat in our living room and told us about it. He told my brother about it, but he would only say so much. He would have never told us anything that would put us in danger. And I said at the time, have you talked to anybody about this? He said, right now, I don't know who I can trust to tell what to. Plus there were rifles, brand new rifles Rinks sold, being hid around dumpsters or in dumpsters out back or simply passed out the back door. And there had to be employees or so many things going on.
So some sketchy stuff, you know, and you can imagine that the people who were kind of acting a little sketchy at Rinks would want Arthur gone. And they definitely wanted that little black book gone. He was in their way. The weeks leading up to the murder, weird things were happening. So again, I'm going to let Sheila explain.
And Dad was even overheard sometime that week arguing with someone on the phone, which no one knew who he was talking to. So someone was putting pressure on him. Plus, either beginning of that week or the week right before that, he got an anonymous call on his phone, went to the phone, and they said, your house is on fire. And he took off, to go home right away, and there was no fire. It was a false alarm to get him out of the store for some reason.
Now, I prank called a lot growing up, but I never called a random department store and told the man working your house is on fire. And like, even if it was like a prank call, I feel like Arthur was probably like, what do you mean my house? Like, questioned it before he just locked up the entire store and ran home. So somebody wanted to get him out of the shop so they can do something in the shop. And before I move on, I must say Arthur did have a stepdaughter named Kathy. And Kathy was ornery as hell. She was about 20 years old at the time when Arthur went missing and then was found murdered. And she hung around with a bad crowd. It was rumored that she knew somebody by the name of Jimmy Rogers, who was much older than her. And he was a bad boy. A bad boy with a lot of girlfriends. I don't know why that was the most surprising part when I was looking him up, but Kathy was a pothead. So, okay, this is the 70s. This is 1979 now. And being a pothead in 1979 was not looked at the way, I don't even think potheads get looked at now. I don't even think potheads is a term. But back then, it was like, did you hear about Arthur Smith's stepdaughter? She smokes the devil's lettuce. Nowadays, like, people don't do that, but she was running with a rough crowd. And by rough, I mean they were robbing people and they were doing a lot more illegal activity than just smoking weed. And she was cashing fake checks at Rinks department store. She was also trying to get somebody to rob her stepdad. And it wasn't like, beat the crap out of my stepdad and take all his money when he leaves the shop, because he was leaving Rinks and going to the bank with $60,000 to like $100,000 every night. And she wanted that money. So she was wanting somebody to rob him. And she didn't want anyone to murder him, but take the money. She was probably just as cold as her mother. But she was cashing these fake checks at Rinks. Arthur finally caught on to it and pressed charges. And there was a lot of like, no, don't press charges. And Arthur was like, no, press charges. Just like he was like, press charges on that lawyer's son. And he was done. He was done with the tomfoolery. Saturday, he was supposed to meet with the police and Kathy. Unfortunately, on October 12th, the Friday before, he didn't come home.
This happened on Friday night. He didn't come home. At first I said, has he had a heart attack? I don't. And she said, no, I wish he had. But everything we knew pointed to the fact, not just us, but witnesses, that he had went home that night. They had a big chest freezer. You could lay a body in it. It was long enough. In the back wall of the garage. And it was a smaller house. It was a one-car garage. They had a lot of stuff stored in that garage. They couldn't park the car in there. Hadn't been able to because there's too much stuff in the garage. He disappeared on Friday night. By Sunday, she could park that garage had been cleaned out, and she parked that car in that garage, and it came clear up to the freezer. Saturday morning, she also was waiting when the bank, they opened the door. She went in, Citizens Federal, and took that's documented, all but $150 of their savings account. I don't know how much money he had in it. Yeah. He had money. She found a lawyer that would, to settle his estate, and I've got the papers on his estate, which says he didn't have nothing. She falsified that. And there was no money showing in the banks then. Where'd that money go? She came out Sunday morning, but she would not sit down and talk to us. She never did sit down and talk to us. And when you would ask her anything, she would get, try to cut you off and be real defensive.
Okay, first off, how are you going to sit there and say you wished your missing husband had a heart attack? Witnesses saw Arthur successfully lock up on the phone with the police, get in his car, and drive home towards his house. And then nobody knows, apparently. But his wife was acting weird. She goes to the bank and she takes out all the money. Who does that, okay? Who has a missing husband and they are worried about taking money out of the bank before filing a missing person report? I get she did try to file a missing person report immediately, but why would money be on your mind? Why would his money be on your mind? And then why did all of a sudden you wanted to park your car in the garage? You couldn't park your car in the garage before, but your husband gets missing and that's on your mind. Money, I need to fit my car in the garage. What? And convenient for Kathy, she ain't getting talked to about missing checks anymore. When they did try to go talk to Kathy about her stepfather missing, she was nervous and she was shaking. To make this case even more complicated, Arthur Smith's wife, Marianne, was sleeping with this cop named Dean Ransbottom. And Dean took over the case of missing Rinks department store manager Arthur Smith. So let's do a quick recap of everybody that could possibly want Arthur out of the way. The lawyer's son, who was stealing drugs from the drugstore that was inside Rinks. Whoever the heck was working at Rinks and selling guns out the back door. Kathy, who did not want to get charged with the fake checks, but also wanted people to rob her father. Arthur's wife, who was much younger than him and sleeping with a cop. 4 people. And conveniently, those 4 people could easily work together to make this case very difficult to solve. Okay, so he goes missing on October 12th. October 15th, his car was found with the keys still in the ignition, just conveniently parked in the open. And the only fingerprints in that car was Kathy's. October 21st, Arthur Smith's body was found. And again, I'm going to let Sheila explain the autopsy.
At the autopsy, internal organs didn't show, he couldn't have been out there. It looked like he had just died a day or two before.
There was no, like, he wasn't bleeding out into the soil, correct?
No. There wasn't enough blood.
Yeah, I was...
And his body, they said his body, they had a hard time getting a blood sample from his chest, which I've been told by Highway Patrol, that's how they go in.
Yeah.
To get a sample. And it looked like he had been redressed. The only thing was, they said his shirt was like wrinkled, like they had grabbed him with one hand or by the shirt to help pick him up. They also used his belt, but his socks were never found, and his glasses were never found, and he wore his glasses all the time. He'd be there, he had a habit of going in and like untying one shoe,
And kicking it off.
Getting it off, and then taking his foot and pulling on the heel of the other and not untying it.
Sure. Yeah.
And they have a picture of that. I saw it. And that's what he done when he went home, and that's how his shoes were found, set neatly by his head in the field.
So it's pretty obvious Arthur Smith went home after he left the store because he ate. His shoes were taken off the way that he takes them off. And he had undigested dinner in his stomach. And it was the knockwurst. I don't even know what that is, but she made it quite often. And he ate it. According to an investigator note, she had 2 different stories about when he ate. So that big old chest freezer, most likely he was put in there because his body didn't add up to the temperatures. He also didn't have blood on his clothes. There was no blood in the ground. So he had to have been put there after he was murdered. His autopsy showed that he was struggling and he did get one arm out. Somebody had to have tied him up. Prosecutors were really zeroing in on Kathy knowing something. But out of nowhere, the case goes cold. Thanks to Officer Dean Ransbottom and everybody else at the Bellefontaine Police Department. 3 years later, George Wesley Skates was convicted for the murder of Arthur Smith. This is what Sheila has to say about it.
Do you believe George is innocent?
Oh yeah, we did from the get-go. My husband looked at me and he said, I never heard of this guy. He didn't have a thing to do with this. And the more we heard and after all this went on, we knew he was innocent. We knew we had to do something.
Who the hell is George Skates and why are they trying to pin a murder of a man that was in a town that he didn't even go visit? Stay tuned for part 2.